With The Last of Us show gaining a bunch of popularity, especially since it's on HBO Max, I feel as if a lot of people are going to be very disappointed with Season 2, much like how a lot of people were disappointed with Part 2 for pretty justifiable reasons. Especially since Last of Us 2 was hyped up and this game won Game of the Year when it came out, which makes no sense considering everyone hated it. Plus it made the Game Awards shit, but anyway, I'm not really gonna get into that. I want to get into why I don't really like Last of Us 2 and why I feel as if it's going to ruin the HBO Max show. Also, there was a lot of people that demolished that poll when I put it up, dear lord. Now, I know a lot of people are going to bring up this whole thing on the gameplay. Well, here's the thing with the gameplay of this game. It's one of those games where the gameplay is so much better, not really so much better, but like better than the story itself. But even the gameplay can't really save this game because of the fact that it feels so forced and generated, especially when there's a whole jump scare element. Like, what's the point of a jump scare if you're just gonna force it upon the viewer? Like, the whole point of a jump scare is to surprise the viewer, not really just shove it in their face and force it upon them. That's all I really have to say gameplay-wise, so let's get into the actual writing of this shitfest game.
We done messing, girl, goodbye, don't wanna hear you, sorry.
The way they did Joel in this game was pretty disappointing. I mean, if you didn't really go into this game knowing full well what was going to happen to him, then, yeah, I can only really blame you and yourself for that. Like, you obviously know full well what's going to happen to Joel in the second game, but the way that it happens is one of the dumbest ways and one of the worst character assassinations I've ever seen in my life. I don't really mind the whole name drop thing, albeit how do you know that this is the correct Joel? Because I mean, when you really think about it, Jackson is such a big place with a whole bunch of people, anyone there could literally have the name Joel. I've seen people talk about how Joel, he deserved what happened and all that, and some people have even tried using Henry and Sam as an example. The only reason why he doesn't try attacking Henry and Sam is because of Ellie, and also if the hunters actually did spot, Ellie and Joel, then they would easily get demolished. Plus, the cutscene makes it pretty clear that Henry and Sam aren't hunters, so where the hell do you get that idea from? Plus, the two don't really serve as a threat, so it wouldn't really matter if they were, because then Joel and Ellie could actually deal with them. I feel as if people's brains have just gone soft and just smooth brain when it comes down to Joel from the first game to make shitty arguments about him in the second game and basically being all Twitter-like and like,
oh, well, he deserved it, and blah, 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 Twitter mentality.
Yeah, just be quiet, please. I find it stupid how somebody like Joel, after living in this zombie-like hellhole for pretty much 20 years, just suddenly goes soft after 4 years. Like, imagine if Kratos just suddenly forgot all of his Spartan training and forgot how to use even the most basic of weapons just because he was with Faye and Atreus for all of that time. Plus, it doesn't make any sense because they show him still being the same Joel that we know in Jackson, so it doesn't really make sense. In a world such as The Last of Us, you don't suddenly just go soft after 4 years of living in peace. That just doesn't really happen, let alone in any apocalypse. And when another YouTuber tried making a video on Last of Us 2 and why it did Joel very dirty, they tried comparing it to Breaking Bad. But the thing is with Breaking Bad and Last of Us was that with Walter, he had always had this huge ego, even when you look back at like interviews that Vincent Gilligan has talked about involving Breaking Bad and Walter, he's always had this ego. Walter suddenly didn't just become Heisenberg within the span of 2 years, that was always a thing that he had to deal with, his ego. Meanwhile, with Joel's case, it doesn't really feel like that at all. Plus, it's a hugely different case because Walt had, again, always had that ego. Meanwhile, with Joel, he was a guy who was basically like a carpenter who had survived for 20 years, found himself a home for 4 years where he still went on patrol and still told people how to protect their homes and defend themselves. And plus, I mean, we're talking about a guy who literally beat up a bloater with just a machete, so how does he suddenly go from, like, this guy who could just handle himself to, oh, I'm just so soft and weak? Congratulations, Neil, you have directly contradicted yourself. It would be one thing if they had shown signs of, Joel's age catching up to him via whatever, but it's not even the case with that at all. The whole cabin scene doesn't really serve a purpose outside of just setting up Abby as a character that we're supposed to hate, although that changes later on, so again, it just doesn't make sense because it shows us one thing and then directly tries changing it up by showing us another. I started with this point in the video because I knew people were instantly going to go down in the comments and be like,
Oh, you're just mad that Joel died.
which I know there is a small minority of people that are just upset about this whole thing for that one reason in particular, but outside of that, this game kind of treats Joel like a pile of corn shit. As if he wasn't the character in the first game that we got to know a whole bunch about. As if this wasn't the same guy who was willing to doom over pretty much the entire world just to save Ellie. I'm not saying that Joel shouldn't have died in this game, but at least he could have gone out like a true G rather than just a wannabe Negan type of way. Like, all you really had to do was just sacrifice him to zombies in like any sad way that you could, and I probably would have bought into it, but not really in this type of way. That's all I really have to say about Joel in Last of Us 2 and how he was poorly written in that game, which brings me to another point in this video. This is one of those stories where every single character is a complete and utter dumbass. There are so many times within this game's story where a character like, say, Ellie or Abby has a chance to unalive the other, but they never really do because plot. Like, there are times where a character like Abby has Ellie dead to rights, dead to center, and is able to, straight up unalive him, but just doesn't. Then there are also things like, the other Wolf members basically just leaving their names on pictures of themselves, so, they act so surprised when the person that they emotionally hurt by unaliving the other was, just straight up just going after them. It's like fighting a bear and then being surprised when the bear one-shots you. That's like smacking a cobra on the head and then being surprised when the cobra bites you. Again, there are other times where other characters are complete dumbasses, but I'm not really going to elaborate on that because I would be sitting here way too long. Long story short, for a game that's message is, oh, violence doesn't solve anything, violence would solve a whole lot more problems than it would, just avoiding it. Like, congratulations, Neil, you try making this whole story that's like, oh, well, revenge and violence doesn't solve anything, but then you make the whole thing just a revenge quest that's poorly written, and not to mention, you also decide to just make it a story where violence would solve a lot more than it actually, would just by being avoided. Again, not much here other than, that whole thing I went on about, and oh yeah, I forgot to mention, flashbacks are everywhere in this game.
Evening, cunts.
To any people out there, just watching this video and they want to write their own story or write their own franchise or whatever, please don't constantly use flashbacks. Like, please don't. It gets annoying pretty quickly. Like, Naruto has done this shit so many times to the point where Shippuden, one of the things that actually annoyed me with it was the constant flashbacks. Like, I'm pretty sure when it comes down to characters like Naruto or Batman, I'm pretty sure I could literally recite their childhoods word for word, bar for bar, more than I can my own at this point. Now, to be fair, the flashbacks do elaborate more on Abby, but the thing is that they don't really make Abby any more interesting than she already isn't. But there are so many flashbacks within this game that it honestly makes my head hurt. Again, not much here, and it is one of my pet peeves with the story, but again, it's pretty basic to talk about. Now let's get into the main course of this video, and one of the biggest things I don't like about this game, and that's Abby and the way that she's written.
I've got to say, in all honesty, it's the biggest piece of dog shit that I have ever heard.
This game really likes pulling very cheap-ass writing tricks to try and make us like Abby, even though if you really want to be simple, she's just there to be this buff woman that kills Joel and is meant to be a hateable character. But when you really think about the way that she's written, it's pretty dog shit. I never understood the point of a character that's literally meant to be hateable, like we're meant to hate this person, but then they give them a sad backstory expecting us to feel sorry for them. Like, imagine if Dead Rising 2 suddenly decided to make TK a sympathetic villain, even though he literally framed Chuck and tried stealing money for pretty much everyone in this whole thing and tried taking advantage of the whole Zombrex situation. Imagine if Street Fighter tried giving M. Bison a sympathetic backstory, even though the whole literal point of him is that everyone hates him and that he's evil. It feels ridiculously one-sided, because the game at some points is like, hey Ellie, you did this horrible thing, boo! Oh, and then Abby shows up and does something possibly worse. Oh, well, she was totally justified, guys, just totally. It's like Neil just has like an obsession with this character. I imagine Neil just has like a shrine of Abby in his room. He just licks the muscles off of Abby at night. Like, that's literally what he does. He's like, yeah, you're my favorite written character. Oh my god. Can't wait for that to be clipped and then taken out of context. I don't care, I'm keeping that in the video. I think that's funny. Neither in any point of this game does Abby actually acknowledge her whole role in this whole cycle. If anything, she'd much rather yell at Tommy and Ellie for giving them a chance and how they took it for granted and blah blah blah. Like, that's not really solving anything, and that's not really doing anything to help this poorly written character. She's a trigger-happy moron who literally ignored Ellie's plea for this whole thing to stop and just, hear me out and, just peace and whatever. She decides to try and almost, just unalive Tommy and Dina. If Lev wasn't there, then she wouldn't have done this, and then she has the nerve to go out of her way to threaten this bitch. Some other cheap writing tricks include her playing with animals and being nice to people around her, which is just like basic human shit. Oh, and not to mention, this whole story tries making her, again, a complex character, but her story feels pretty irrelevant at the end of everything, and when you really think about it, her whole story is just a watered-down version of Joel's, like I said earlier. She doesn't even try learning Ellie or Joel's side of the story and just goes about her way trying to ruin Ellie's life. I don't even think she knows who Ellie is. I don't even think she even knows her name. No, wait, seriously, she doesn't even refer to her as her actual name. So congratulations, Naughty Dog, you guys wrote a character that is not only shit, but doesn't even know the actual protagonist's name. Congratulations. The whole poor revenge story is so balls deep into this game that they literally make the two leads of this fucking game, and I'm not even gonna censor that. I'm not even gonna censor that one bit. That's how pissed off I am. They're not even gonna make the two leads have a decent or good rivalry. Is she not even interested on who she is, why she even came after them, and not to mention, imagine her reaction to knowing that her dad was unalived just for Ellie to live. That would be pretty interesting and decent for this story that's already bad, but no, we need to make it worse. All it literally is just them bobbing and weaving against one another, and there's no lines of dialogue, no taunts, no nothing, just bobbing and weaving and a really boring boss fight in really dense water. One way that this character could have been redeemed, and hopefully they actually go down this route in the HBO show if they actually plan on changing anything whatsoever, is making Abby more of a Negan-like character. The thing is with Negan is that, yeah, he is a guy that pretty much took away one of the characters that was closest to the main character, but the thing is with him is that he's super charismatic, and that's what makes Negan likable. It's way more entertaining watching Negan casually taunt Rick over anything. That is super entertaining, and I like that. But then compared to Abby, it's like, oh my lord, why? It's right there. Like, Abby's character was pretty lackluster, and that's such a basic archetype for a story like this. Literally just have her be that character. But at the end of the day, Abby's story is horrible, it's shitty, it doesn't even make her any better than she already isn't, and it doesn't really do anything to help this game. Also, here's what I want to say. I'm sorry if I feel like I'm personally offending anyone who actually likes this game's pretty bad story. If anything, I don't really care, but stop calling this shit revolutionary and original. Oh, but you get to see the villain side of the story, and you get to play as them. Not like Assassin's Creed did that how many times? I think it was like twice they did that. A lot of shows tend to do that with revenge stories. You get to see the whole villain side of the story, and also other games end up doing the same thing. Games like Tekken and Devil May Cry come to mind when it comes down to me thinking of those types of times. You know what, screw it, I'll just segue into the whole revenge plot thing, because I feel as if I actually want to talk about this thing. Revenge plots have basically been intertwined with writing since God knows how long, and I feel as if the story would have been way better, not really way better, but at least a slightly original in a sense, if Abby had just, completely gotten what she had deserved and Ellie had gotten full closure from it. I feel like revenge stories work best when it comes down to things like superhero stories, because characters like Spider-Man, Daredevil, Batman, or Superman don't start the stories off by just straight up unaliving other characters. So once there is a moment of tension where you think, oh, are they gonna break it? Are they gonna break that code? It actually does provide some form of tension.
Oh, but Ellie wouldn't be as good as Abby if she had done that.
Here's the thing. Bruh, have you not played the first game, my boy? I feel as if people just blatantly memory wipe everything they knew about the first game to defend this. Ellie literally has been able to take out people before she was old enough to drive, before she was old enough to even touch a little bit of liquor on her lips, bro. After everything Abby has done, and plus she doesn't even know anything about Abby's side of the story, so why would Ellie care? Like, make it make sense, please, make it make sense, dear Lord. Like, would you forgive someone if they did everything that Abby did to Ellie but to you? Would you forgive that person? And plus, not to mention, why would she even forgive her if she was such a blight on her life ever since that day, dude? Especially after all of the flashbacks that happened, she still decides to go after Abby, so it's like, flashbacks don't really mean anything in that scenario where she thinks of Joel with the guitar. Somehow, after going through hell and back, it seems like she has suddenly forgiven her after one flashback. What? It's like this flashback is only really there to slightly justify the whole thing, even though it pretty much never really seems to justify it at any percentage whatsoever. Some people have tried using the excuse that she's forgiving both Abby and Joel, but that's two completely different cases. And plus, in a game where you end up beating the hell out of people to pretty much death just by weapons or, just firepower alone, it doesn't really make sense to have this whole revenge and violence doesn't solve anything. Yeah, as I'm beating a guy with a wrench. It's basically just, oh, well, the plot has to happen, so this has to happen. It tries making you feel bad for everything, but then it completely contradicts itself. I should also mention the fact that Neil Druckmann was preaching, oh, don't be problematic, guys, don't be like this, don't be like that, and then it was revealed that he was abusing people behind the scenes of this game. Oh my lord, Neil, you are an anomaly. Like, bro is preaching about being a good person and being diverse, all while he's not really, being a good person at all behind the scenes. And speaking of diversity, wow, the side characters, especially as minority characters, are horribly written in this game, dear lord. I don't really care for Dina. If anything, the only purpose she really serves is just being Ellie's whole girlfriend and whatever. Like, there's no negative friction between each other. They're automatically into each other. There's not really much tension with each other. It's just nothing. Whenever Dina's on screen, I don't really feel anything towards this character. I don't really feel anything for this character at all. Not even any of the characters on the whole Wolf side of things aren't even that good at all. One of the only decent characters within this whole game is Jesse, but they did his character super dirty. Abby's dad doesn't really serve much of a purpose outside of just being whatever. I mean, oh my god, guys, he saved zebras. But the thing is that he was about to unalive Ellie and send Joel off without his weapons, so, yeah, where's that whole defense for him? Also, I find it stupid with the whole thing with, oh, well, let's just go ahead and, just take away Ellie's life because she's immune. One, how do you know that this is the only immune person out there in the world? And two, like, why are you not even gonna study them? The show explained it in a pretty decent way, but the game has never really bothered to explain anything whatsoever. And speaking of that whole immunity, shouldn't Dina be bombarding Ellie with a bunch of questions about her immunity and all that? I don't really have an issue with any of the minority or ethnic characters within this game outside of a writing standpoint, because I know some Twitter warriors are going to be mad that,
oh, well, you're just mad that they're ethnic. You're just mad about that, you bigot.
I'm just going to say it, and I'm just going to say it once for all the Twitter people that are probably lurking in the comments. Look, bad writing doesn't discriminate. It clearly doesn't. Bad writing doesn't discriminate. There are times in games where there's a lot of diversity and there's bad writing, and then there are times where there's little to no diversity and still bad writing. Walking Dead had a bunch of ethnic characters and they decided to just kill them off right afterwards. They just decided to kill them off like boom, 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 boom. They were just going ham when it came down to doing that, dear lord. Also, I find it ironic that a bunch of ethnic characters die in this game, and this game is being preached about all diversity and representation, when a bunch of the minority characters are pretty much just dead, all for the sake of the white female protagonist. Like, I'm not really trying to accuse anyone of anything here, or trying to say something else entirely, but I just find it hugely ironic, and I kinda wanted to point it out. I mean, hell, Naughty Dog doesn't even do anything good with its LGBTQ characters, especially with the way they just straight up assassinated Ellie's character in this game. Just stop acting like Naughty Dog is this huge, like, oh, symbol of representation, when in reality they're not. And I also find it ironic that this game was released during Pride Month on Juneteenth, the day before Father's Day. Oh my lord, Neil, you did not give a single fuck, did you, my guy? But this video in and of itself is already super long, and I feel as if the topic of representation already deserves a video on its own, so I'm just gonna end the video right here and not really say anything else outside of this. Dead Rising is a better zombie game. Go ahead and play that over Last of Us 2. Also, in case you're wondering, pretty much a large majority, if not pretty much every single thing about what I just mentioned in this video, pretty much everything will bite the show's ass in the end. And it sucks because the show is actually good. Now here's the thing, unless they change things around and, they actually listen to fans, then hey, maybe, it won't be that bad. But knowing Neil and his obsession with Abby and pretty much the large majority of, Twitter, they're not really going to allow that, are they? Again, unless they actually listen to fans and decide to switch things around, I don't really see it ever really being that good. And if they do change things around, then you already know the Twitter people are going to get mad. So, yeah, that's it.
Oh my god, bro. Oh, hell, man. What the fuck, man? I just keep your ass.
But this ain't me against the world part.
You fucking.